Okay, hi folks. I really appreciate people coming out today. I know it's really hot, certainly is where I am. Sitting inside and watching me explain about the big solar co-op is an investment of time and sweat. Thank you. Um, so how to invest in new solar in the big solar co-op. This is a lovely picture, by the way, of just trying to give some scale of a big roof. This is the first one we installed, in fact, in Kerry Foods in Tenbury, Wales. So what we're going to cover, we're going to talk about what the big solar co-op is and why it's needed, or why we think it's needed, how we work, look at some of our sites, talk a little bit about our structure and who we are, and then finish by talking about how you can invest. So this question is really the kind of question that started off big solar co-op. Why hasn't every big roof got solar? And it's a question that kind of comes up in a very sort of common sense context. I've spent a lot of time talking to people who all seem to have their own pet roof in their community where they say this is building should definitely have it, and they don't, which is surprising. If we zoom up a little bit and look at UK generation, I mean, there's some great stories in this map, in this graph. You can see, for example, coal going off the generation grid completely. Hey, brilliant. Wind increasing steadily, and wind is largely the thing that enabled coal to come off and is now having an impact on gas as well. Down here is yellow, so solar's doing its bit, but as you can see, it's not an amazing, raging success story in the UK. It's been steadily growing. And if we go into that a little bit more, this is a graph I made from government figures showing deployment across different scales of solar. So, and you can see that basically around about this time, everything went gangbusters. No great prizes for guessing what that is. That's when the feed-in tariffs came in, and equally not too many prizes for guessing what happened here, which is that the feed-in tariffs ended, and you see a real, cutting off at the knees of solar in the UK, but also a recovery. So this recovery of domestic scale solar. This is the 0 to 50 kilowatts domestic and small rooftops. A recovery to some extent of large scale solar here. This green line, this is 5 megawatt plus, so that's all ground mount systems basically. But in the middle here, what about this yellow line, which is everything, all big roofs and small ground mount, or relatively small ground mount. See that kind of flat line, which is confusing, I think. So what isn't getting built? Well, there isn't that much rooftop solar being built on commercial buildings. So a lot of factories where you'd think it was an absolute no-brainer. Similarly, on community buildings, there is solar on some schools, on some hospitals, but not on all of them, and that's surprising. And then there's not very much ground mount solar being built on suitable sites, on ground-based sites. All of that now is focused on very, very large, or almost all of it is focused on very, very large sites indeed. So the next question is obviously why not? And we've spent a long time asking people about this. I mean, one of the reasons it's complicated. So people think I'll just get some solar on the roof, and then they find out that it's actually not that simple. You have to apply for grid connections. You have to understand the solar technologies. And that leads people into the next question, which is, who can I trust to help me with this? And maybe some people haven't had always brilliant experiences with that. And then this final one here, which is really the key to it for a lot of businesses and community organizations, the return on investment for them is not actually that great. So, good case scenario payback time of investing in solar might be, I don't know, 7 years realistically, all things taken into consideration, which might sound quite good, but we speak to a lot of businesses that say, or people in businesses that say, I've taken this to my committee, and they say, if it doesn't have a payback time of 3 years, I've got no chance. We've even heard 18 months. Everything I take to the finance committee's got to pay back in 18 months. So that is never going to do that. as far as we can tell. So we have our approach to Big Solar Co-op is to provide solutions to that problem, these problems that are stopping solar being built. So yes, it's complicated, but we manage it. Who to trust? Well, we're a not-for-profit, we're a carbon-first organization, and that gets us in the door a lot of times where commercial sort of hard sell organizations might not. And then this return on investment not high enough. It may not be that high for a company investing internally, but because the main source of our money is members of the public investing, retail investors who are willing to take relatively low returns over a long period of time, we can make it work in a way that some businesses can't. So just a quick summary of how we work in the rooftop context. It's a very familiar model, I think, probably to everybody here. We build solar, we own it on other people's buildings. We generate electricity, we sell it to them. If there's any left, we export it to the grid, and they get a fixed price. They get a 30-year fixed price. So it takes a big chunk of their electricity use out of the vagaries of the rest of the electricity market, and gives them savings financially and carbon savings. Another major aspect of what we do is around ethical solar. So I don't know if anybody's interested in this, the issue of forced labour in solar. This report is actually quite old now, 2019 report from Sheffield Hallam University is required reading, really, where they documented in detail how forced labour practices are associated with the solar supply chain. And actually, there are very, very few manufacturers where we can be sure that they're not using materials that are implicated in forced labour practices. And we've always made a point of buying from those manufacturers and paying more. We pay more for the panels. I mean, they also happen to be very high quality panels, so that's quite helpful. But yes, that's something we've really put out our stand for. Just to give you an idea of how the whole thing fits together, and these numbers are sort of just indicative here, but we would expect about 65% of our revenue to come from sales on site. So we're selling to the people who are using the power, generally the building underneath the roof that we've got solar on. About a quarter of it from export to the grid. We get paid a lot less from exporting to the grid. And then we might get some other income for basically certificates for producing green energy. And then the major cost for us on this side is the cost of finance. So paying back the people who provided us with capital, whether that be shareholders, bondholders, or loan makers. And then we have the operating expenses associated with running solar, whether that be insurance, cleaning, maintenance, etc. And then some central costs, which is basically staff. Yeah, we might make a small surplus. If we did make a surplus, we're not there to make a surplus, but if we do make a surplus, we'll put it back into solar. And what that means in practice is, right now there are sites we're looking at where we can't make it stack up. If we were a bit more profitable in the future, we might go back to those sites and say, well, we can make those happen now. Which is interesting because those do tend to quite often be the community sites, the smaller solar sites very often. So these are the sites that we've got up and running at the moment, clustered in the Midlands, though we're starting to build outside the Midlands as well, Fremantle, particularly in Southampton there. And it's a real mix. So there are some supermarkets here, there's a doctor's surgery, there's a listed building, there's a hotel, there are schools, there's and there are some industrial sites as well. This is just a little visualization of our production over time. So you can see this is roughly when we started. And you can see that obviously the seasonal effect is very, very big with solar. But our heights this year are getting much higher. And the colours are increasing, which is essentially more sites are coming on board. So that's something we can get from our monitoring systems. And the other thing we can get is that on a site-by-site basis, we've got real-time information. It's quite interesting. So this snapshot shows Twigs, which is a steel stockholder in and general steel-related stores in Derbyshire. That's 40 kilowatts odd is coming from the solar at this point. They're using 17, 24 is going out to the grid. And you can even see the evolution of this over a day. So overnight, this is all their usage overnight, all provided by the grid. In the morning, the sun comes up and they're starting to use only solar. They come into work and switch everything on, and suddenly we're back into grid. But as the day goes on and the sun comes up, this was a good sunny day in this particular example, they're actually getting almost everything out of the grid with only occasional dips into out of solar with only occasional dips into the grid. Yeah, you can see some of this on our website as well. We've got a solar monitor that shows you in aggregate what we're doing, and on top of every page there's this live monitor here, which is real data showing you, what we're doing today. So turning to our sites for the future. So our aim is to build 1 to 2 a month. We've more or less meeting that this year. We've got one very big project, which I'm going to talk about in a second, which has taken up a lot of our resource. But we're basically, all the time we're keeping on our rooftop solar program. And that map shows all the sites we've been looking at recently. So all of these sites have had at least a design from us, and in many cases they've had a proposal for us, or we've got further on and we're into legal discussions with them, really across a really wide range of different sorts of buildings. We're trying to be more or less agnostic about the kind of organizations we work with, not just community buildings but also commercial buildings, and get a bit of a mix going on. One of our most important partnerships is with Mid Counties Co-op. So they're a very familiar to many people, I think, co-op that runs food stores. And we've got 29 sites we identified with them, got another 24 to do over the next sort of year to 18 months. And that's interesting because it's co-ops cooperating with co-ops. That's a lovely story. But also I think because we're working with a chain, and that's something which I think a lot of organizations in the community energy space understandably find quite difficult to do because they're often very regionally based. But with a national focus, we were able to say to Mid Counties, we don't really care where your stores are. If they're suitable for solar, we can do it. Here are some of the sites. So I've said upcoming sites, but actually 2 of these are built now, Daventry and Bloxwich. Church Stretton is yet to be built, but it's coming up. What I like about this slide is, it's quite a boring slide, right? These are quite humdrum places in the sense that everybody's got buildings like this in their community, buildings that use a lot of energy. We've got a big roof. We can see that. That's very clear. Why haven't they got solar? Why haven't they got solar? Let's put solar on all of them. And that's us doing exactly what we aim to do. Some other fun sites. So this is Hornsey Steels in Shropshire, almost a sort of poster child for the kind of manufacturing business that we're able to put solar on. Actually, one of the things they manufacture is roofs. So they made their own roof, and then we covered it in solar. That's a very nice story. And then a couple of community sites. So Dean's here at Fremantle in Fremantle and Shirley Community Centre in Southampton, that's got this incredibly wide range of services they provide for the local community. And then this Shropshire Hills Discovery Centre with its sort of yin and yang-ish turf roof, which it's taken us a little while to figure out exactly how to do, but that's due to be installed starting in just a few weeks' time. We've also done a few mergers where people who were running cooperatives and have been running them for years wanted a succession plan. And so they've merged with Big Solar Co-op. Their members have voted to become members of ours, and we run their solar now. This is a project I'm sure some of you have seen, Whiteborough Solar. So most of our projects are rooftop, but we've always kind of had an interest in, is there a niche for doing ground mount solar if you do it right? One of the main concerns, certainly one of my concerns, is you don't want to use land that could be used for agricultural purposes. That's a big concern for a lot of people, I think. And we came across this site, which is in Nottinghamshire. It's a former open cast mine, which was filled in the 60s, became very low grade agricultural land. And so what we're trying to do at Whiteborough is really do as low carbon solar farm as you can possibly do. We'll call it a solar park because it's kind of smaller than a big solar farm. And so we've got one of the things we're doing here is to put on some second life solar panels, some solar panels that are being taken away from another place and still have 20 years of life, to put them into this project as part of our solar array here. So to bring down the embodied carbon of the site. And we've also got a plan for biodiversity improvement on the site. So it's a very low biodiversity site at the moment. So that's actually, here's a little map showing you, there's our site in red, and this blue is all areas that were open cast mines. So you can see that basically the whole site was the site of an open cast mine, and these X's are previous mining activity. Top right is what it looks like at the moment. So horses, you can see the land there. And then this is the start of work. The start of building a solar park is hugely unglamorous. It's things like building new gates, getting security sorted, and in this case, shoveling an awful lot of horse muck. Coming back out to who we are. So we have members, we have a staff team, we have partners we work with. This picture, incidentally, is from our big solar gathering, something we do every year. This is last year in Derby. And any of you very warmly invited to come along to that. So we have volunteer members. We've got over 100 volunteer members who work in different groups. So some people volunteer onto the board, some people are do solar design, and some people do what we call being a site champion. So they found a place that they think should have solar, and they're willing to go and liaise with that place and say, hey, have you ever thought about having solar? And I work with this organization that can make it happen. And we have several examples of that having been successful. We had a go last year with Theo. He's down here. He just finished his GCSEs and he came to us for a week of work experience. And we decided to just try and use our systems to see what he could achieve in a week, which turned out to be great. So he started off, identified this leisure centre and did a design himself. On Tuesday, we kind of worked with him to improve the design. Wednesday, we did a financial model. Thursday, he actually took this in and presented it to the managing director of the leisure centre. And on Friday, he made a package for the board of the board of trustees of that leisure centre. So a 16-year-old going from scratch to being able to present both to MD and to the board in a week. So we thought that was brilliant. And we think, well, if Theo can do it, lots of people, other people might be able to do it too. So that's volunteer members. We also have investor members, people who've bought shares in Big Solar Co-op, a real spread across the UK. Our membership structure is that we're a cooperative society, so we're not a company. We're a society registered directly with the FCA, Financial Conduct Authority, that is. Its voting power doesn't depend on shareholding. So if you've got loads of shares, you don't get more votes, as with other societies. And in our society, the volunteer members ultimately have 75% of the vote. Those are the guys that are putting in the time, they have the majority of the vote. However, investor members, if they wish, can become volunteer members if people want more involvement in running the organisation. This is our board elected from our membership annually, and we have a staff team of 5. We also have lots of different partners outside who do a lot of work with us, including installers, technology providers, and also lawyers. One of our main partners is Sharenergy. So it's a co-op that, as some of you might know, I also co-founded in 2011. Sharenergy works with a lot of community energy organisations across the UK. Really, Big Solar Co-op came as an idea out of Sharenergy, though it's now completely an independent organisation, but gets a lot of services from Sharenergy. And then we've had, we don't have funding from any of these people anymore, but these are all people who funded us in our startup, for our startup period. And we wouldn't be where we are without their funds. So basically, to fund our next sites, we need to raise quite a lot of money. And we've got three real tools to do that: shares, bonds, and loans. So I'll start with the loans. We've had some short-term loans. We borrowed 400,000 from an organisation called We Have the Power as bridging loans to enable us to just get on and build, and we were able to pay that back later. So we've paid those back. We've also borrowed medium-term funds from Resonance, a social lender, and in the long term, we might look to larger amounts of finance. Once you've got a bigger portfolio of solar assets, we can start to look to borrowing money on a larger scale. Never so that it kind of overwhelms the organisation, but it can help us build faster. We've got a share offer, so that's running all the time. Over 2 million raised to date. It's an always rolling share offer, and so there's always an opportunity for people to become investor members. I think it's worth just breaking down. Some people here, I'm sure, will be familiar with sort of withdrawable share capital such as ours. Some people might not be. A comparison to company shares. So the main purpose of company shares is kind of to make money. The bottom line with us is to make solar happen. Share value for a normal share in a company might go up and down. Share value of our shares normally stays the same. The return for shares, company shares, is, effectively it's a dividend, a share of the profits. We call it interest, so it's a payment for providing capital. So there's a subtle difference there. For example, if we were to make loads and loads, if a company was to make loads and loads of money, the shareholders would expect that money to flow back to them. If we were to make loads and loads of money, then we would expect to pay all our members interest, as we normally do, but we wouldn't share all the extra money with them. It would go into our purpose, building solar. Who can buy company shares? Well, very often you have to go through a broker, or you have to be a sophisticated investor. Because of the legislation around our shares, we can offer them directly to members of the public. And then risks. So, if you buy any kind of shares, there's the normal business risks. Any business, whether it's our type of business or a for-profit business, can be run well or badly. And if things go wrong, you can lose all your capital. That applies to us just as it would to a commercial business. I mean, we're a relatively low risk type of business in the sense that your money as an investor generally goes into buying solar assets. Solar is a fairly low risk technology, and we're signing 30-year deals with people that that are our solar hosts. So, compared to many companies, that's a lower risk profile. But yeah, the bottom line is you can lose all your capital. So yeah, buying shares is very easy. You can buy shares from our website. Anybody over 16 can buy shares, so it's a low bar in that respect. It's from £100 to 100,000, that top end set by law. And yes, you can pay by pretty much any way that payments can be made. We pay interest payments annually. They ultimately depend on our performance. But we have a target rate, which is 2% above the bank base rate. Or if the bank base rate falls below 3%, our target rate remains at 5%. So our target rate today is 6%. Interest is payable after 1 full year. So we need to have time to take money invested, build some solar, and have the solar run for a year before we can pay out interest. And interest can be paid out as cash, or it can be reinvested. And we had a lot of members last year choose to reinvest their interest. I don't think that's something which other community energy organisations are currently doing, but it makes a lot of sense for us because we've got such a big pipeline of new projects. Some questions that people ask about shares very often. Can I withdraw share capital? I mean, ultimately, it's a director's discretion. If we've spent all the money that we've got on new solar and there's no money in the kitty at one point, then people might have to wait for withdrawal. We have had several people ask to withdraw shares because their circumstances have changed, and in all cases, their withdrawal has gone straight through. But we can't 100% promise that. It's always at the discretion of directors, but we aim to provide as much liquidity as we can. Shares can't be bought for children, unfortunately, but they can be inherited, and they're inheritance tax exempt up to the newish 1 million cap. Some people might say, well, what's that got to do with me? But we have heard from investor members who say that the inheritance tax exemption is actually a major driver in investing in big solar co-op shares. And interest is taxable, like any other interest. If you have a small amount of investments, then you probably qualify for the personal savings allowance, which means you can get up to, in many cases, £1,000 of interest tax-free in a year. So many people will be covered by that, but some won't. We've also launched a bond offer just to make everything nice and complicated. We've got share and the bond offer at the moment. And the reason we did that is to raise the money for this Whiteborough project. So we needed a big chunk of cash, and we decided to launch a dedicated bond offer. But the bonds are ultimately in big solar co-op, so it's not ring fenced to the project. But the reason for running the bond offer is to raise money for Whiteborough. We're doing that through the Ethex platform, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with. And one of the great reasons we've done that is that they're able to offer an ISA wrapper, an IF ISA, so that if you opt for that wrapper, your interest can be tax-free. It's a fixed rate of 5.5% and a 7-year term. Repaid at the end, no withdrawals on the way through. Eagle-eyed people might have noticed that we've got beyond our targets, 164% raised, and some people have said, well, why are you raising that much? What we initially planned for was a target of 800,000 to be raised this summer and a further $1 million to be raised in the winter. What's happened, as you can see, we've got to 1.3 million already, and there's 40 days to go. So we're trying to push to just raise the whole amount now because it makes sense. Now we're running a bond offer, just let's continue it and not have to run the second one. So that's our approach at the moment. Application for bonds via Ethex. So you have to sign up with Ethex, but it's an easy enough process, and lots of people have managed to do it. I think we've got 380 people who've bought bonds through our bond offer. It's been very successful. I'm putting this slide up. I'm not expecting anybody to read it in detail, but people often ask, what's the difference between shares and bonds? I'm putting it up to say, if you go to our shares page on the website, you'll be able to see this and see some of the detail about the difference between the two. I guess the key thing is the different interest levels, the ISA wrapper on the bonds, and the ability to reinvest interest in shares, which isn't available with the bonds. So people will chart different ways through those alternatives. One other thing that people have often asked for, we're just starting to really think about how we manifest this, is looking at the impact of investment. So we've got a little tool on our shares page, and you can put in how many shares you might want to think about buying, and then you can look at the impacts. So this is £1,000, 1,000 shares, £1,000 worth, which will do these things. I found this one quite interesting. So push enough gas generated electricity off a grid to save about 5% of your personal carbon footprint. That's an average UK carbon footprint, which obviously are in a global context pretty high. So £1,000, that seemed quite good to me. So that's us. I'll take some questions now. But if people don't want to ask questions now, or questions occur later, please you can always email us, info@bigsolar.co.uk, jon@whiteborough.coop. Every email gets a detailed response. Always happy to answer any questions, or get on a call if you want to, if you prefer to do that.